How is everybody this morning? Party notwithstanding. Yeah? Good? You're fine. Excellent. So, I appreciate you dragging yourselves out of bed when you could have been sleeping in on a Sunday to come and listen to me talk about this. So, I'm going to talk about something that I think is actually really relevant, and sometimes people wonder why I show up at developer conferences like this. And one of the reasons I say is because creativity actually touches everybody, and we're going to have a whole discussion about whether or not you think you're creative, and I'm going to tell you that you are. Spoiler alert. And also the inner critic, because, and Dennis is actually going to be talking about this a bit, parts of the inner critic later on in his talk, but I want to talk about some really applicable and somewhat easy ways that you can use, tools that you can use to actually get rid of the voice of self-doubt so that you can actually access your creativity, which I'll tell you why that's important in a minute, and that will actually help you do your best work. So if you're tweeting, I'm Denice Jacobs. My handle is very, very straightforward. You know where we are. And if you do want to use a hashtag for this talk, it's by inner critic, which there's a whole like story behind that. Did you guys hear about any of the Bill Cosby furor that happened a couple of years ago, where he got all the rape allegations and stuff like that? Okay, so Felicia Ayers Allen played his wife on the Cosby Show, and she came out and she basically was just like, "Oh no, he didn't do any of that stuff." And so many people were so angry with her that they were just like, "You are dead to me. Bye, Felicia." And so there's a whole meme of "Bye, Felicia," and that's why I have "Bye, Inner Critic." Is that me doing something? What's happening? Oh, it's my earrings. My earrings are too fabulous for this thing. By the way, I wore these because I totally made these, but that's okay. No, wait, it's still, thank you. I'll be taking autographs later on. No, okay, now I'm not making any weird sounds. Okay. Boom. Go, Christina. Yes. Okay, so I want to talk about how to first, kind of the first step of this process is recognizing your personal power. So I'm going to tell you a few stories from my own life, and hopefully they will help you see things in your own life. So in 2009, I went to South by South Interactive. You guys have heard of South by Southwest, the big interactive festival. It's in Austin, Texas. It's like huge. It draws thousands of people. This was back when it was kind of small and cute. So I went there. Little background story. I was unemployed at the time. I went there to try to make connections and stuff like that. This picture was taken moments before I said 5 words that would completely change my life. So I had 2 days before been lamenting to my hotel roommate, and I was like, "I just want to be a speaker. Is that too much to ask for? What do I have to do to be a speaker?" And she was like, "Well, most of the people I know who have gone that route, who work in the tech industry, have written a book first." And I was like, "Girl, please. I do not need to write another book. The only book I could write is a book on HTML. And Lord knows the world does not need another book on HTML, right?" So 2 days later, or maybe it was even a day later, we're at this party. I take this picture, and then I go upstairs because I'm going to go and try to talk to this dude who was like tall and from Belgium. It's not my fault. And I was going to go and try to talk to this guy, and I ran into a friend of mine, and he was there with his editor. He had written 2 books on UX. He wrote for a company, Peach Pit New Writers. They publish a ton of web design and web development books. He was there with his editor, and so I started talking to his editor, and his editor was like, her name was Wendy, and she was like, "Well, what do you do?" And I was like, "Remember, unemployed." I was like, "Let me tell you what I want to do. I want to speak more and I want to write more." And she goes, "What do you want to write about?" And I was like, "Well, I used to teach web design and web development classes at a community college." And she said, "We're always looking for good authors." and I have an idea for a book on how to troubleshoot CSS. And I said the 5 words that would change my life, which is, I could write that book. Now, had you known what was going on in my head beforehand, you would have known that what was happening in my head was like this kind of jury, like one side that was saying, oh my God, you're unemployed, what are you doing? This like makes no sense. And besides, you're not an expert, what do you know? Blah, blah, blah. And the other side in my head said, shut up, I've got this. And that was the side that stepped forward and said, I could write this book. I taught web development classes. Why couldn't I write that book? Why wouldn't I know enough to write a book about CSS? So luckily I said those words, and then a year later, not only did my first book come out, the CSS Detective Guide, but then I ended up going and speaking at the Future of Web Design in London, my very first international speaking engagement. Woo! So, my friend was right, actually. She was like, write a book, and then stuff will happen, right? And if I had listened to those voices in my head, and you guys all know those voices, right? The you don't know enough, and you're not an expert enough, and you haven't been doing this long enough, and so-and-so else is so much better at this, and I can't believe that amazing thing that they put on GitHub, and like all the things that you see, right? And all the things that you think, you know those voices. And you also know how they make you feel. Terrible, depressed, stuck, miserable. It's not fun, it's not enjoyable, right? And then it leads to stuff like imposter syndrome. Denise is going to be talking about that later. It leads to things like doubting yourself and thinking that there's different measurements for other people. Other people don't have to be amazing. You're the one who has to be amazing and perfect and get it right the first time every time and not make mistakes. But everybody else, it's okay, right? Right? It's just awful stuff. This is why I feel like the inner critic is so problematic. Now, this kind of leads me then to creativity. The inner critic's problematic because, as I'll actually talk about in a moment, it actually works against what your brain naturally does to be creative. And creativity is, I think, okay, how many of you guys have been in an awesome flow state? Time passes, all that stuff. What does it feel like? What does it feel like? Awesome. What else? But I had to do it like the American way. Awesome. This is the British way. Awesome. The American way. Awesome. Right? What else? What else? What happens when you're in that flow state? What happens with time? It just flies. How do you feel physically? Like what happens? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. See, I need to have her with me all the time. She's like, there, done, hired. You feel energized. You feel good about yourself. Don't you want to be able to feel like that all, like, more of the time than not, rather than like sitting there like hitting your head or like sitting there thinking to yourself, oh my God, this is gonna be, I can't do this and I suck and why and I shouldn't even try. Like, that's awful. It's so much better to be in this state. And we can access this state when we want. The inner critic actually blocks creativity on a neurological level. If you actually look at neuroscience, there's a part of the brain that's called the prefrontal cortex. The part of your brain that's a prefrontal cortex is involved with self-evaluation, with modifying behavior, with self-judgment. And studies have shown that a guy actually has done a study where he puts people in an MRI machine. He gives them a keyboard. He does improvisational jazz with them, and he measures their brain while that's happening. He also has hip-hop artists do it. And what happens is, what it shows is that part of the brain shuts down and quiets down, and then that's what lets all of the ideas and all of the associations and all of the connections and all that stuff happening. That's what happens. So when the inner critic is going on, you can't be creative. And when the inner critic is gone, you can. So the problem is that when we're in the throes of the inner critic, it's like that power that we can access, that power that we have available to us all the time, it's like we just give it away. Like, here you go. Don't want it, can't use it, don't know what to do with it. How about we do? So I want to try to help you guys get to a point where you've got some tools where you stop having this be so much of a problem. You can stop thinking small about what you're capable of and what you can do, and you can start thinking bigger. So the question is, where does the inner critic come from? Does anybody have any ideas? Dennis was like, I know. No spoilers, Dennis. Yes. What happens? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's what happens. So I think the way I think about it is, it's people say, you hear things from people, authority figures, parents, siblings, peers, whatever, and what happens is that they trigger fears that we already have about ourselves. Sometimes they implant fears that we can later on have about ourselves, but they trigger fears that we already have about ourselves, and then the negative things that we've heard, like I've said, those two things add up together to be the inner critic. Now the problem is that our brains are actually really, really super highly susceptible to this information, especially when we're young. And what happens is there's something called negativity bias, and there's also something called fear conditioning. So imagine this, let's go back, way back in time, like we're in the hunter-gatherer days. And if you're out hunting and gathering, doing your hunter-gatherer thing, right? And you're out and you're you see a bush, boom, it's got beautiful berries on it. And you're like, sweet, it's lunchtime. And you're about to go to the bush and stuff, and then a snake slithers out from underneath it. You don't know if the snake is poisonous or not, but it's a snake, for heaven's sakes. We've got this thing. So a snake slithers out of it. Then maybe moments later, you see a beautiful butterfly. If you think about that bush again, later on, you go back to that area, are you going to be thinking about the snake, or are you going to be thinking about the butterfly? They're going to be like, what butterfly? I don't want to get bitten, right? That is negativity bias. We actually scan for danger all the time, and we're always looking for it. And as soon as we find it, boom, then we have fear conditioning, and fear conditioning puts it into a part of our brains. It's called implicit memory, and it goes there to be accessed by our brains immediately. We don't even have to think about it. There's no conscious thought. We just, boom, go right to that, and then we respond to that because it affects subconscious behavior. It goes right into our subconscious. We can't control it. But what we can do is we can control it with some mental power tools. So here's the good news. That was the bad news. It's just news, it's neutral, whatever. But here's the good news. You guys ready for the good news? These mental power tools you already have. We are literally, we come out of the box with fear conditioning and negativity bias, scanning for danger, but we also come out of the box with one thing that is called neuroplasticity. I'm sure you guys have all heard of it. Who hasn't heard of neuroplasticity? Okay, so neuroplasticity is basically the same way you can build up muscles when you exercise. Neuroplasticity is that for the brain, right? So neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to adapt and change in the face of different stimulus. So that means that, for example, if you're thinking a thought that's a habitual thought, it's like going down a path in the forest. If you go down the path in the forest and you go down it long enough, back and forth, what happens? It gets really well established, right? That path gets really well established. Our brains are like that. The neurons and the neural networks in our brains are like that. The more and more and more they use them, the more the neurons wire and fire together, and it gets thick. Becomes like this big, well-established network. Whereas when you start to go on another path, and you're walking up and down this other path, what happens in a forest? What happens in a forest if you're going down a different path other than the one that you're... Right, and then what happens to the old path? It gets grown over. Same things in our brains. Amazing. Science. So, the way that it can be controlled is through attention and focus. It's about what you pay attention to. If you're always paying attention to those thoughts, those negative thoughts and those thinking then you're going to keep running down that track and you're just going to get it really well established. But as soon as you start paying attention to something else, you start to change that. I want you guys to do something. I want you to hold up your hands, both of your hands. And I want you to look at your left hand. Just look at it, kind of gaze lovingly upon your left hand. You haven't seen it in a while. Hi, left hand. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to just slowly move your attention from your left hand to your right hand. Is your left hand still there? Do you care about it? Are you really paying attention to your right hand? No using peripheral vision. You're like, I can see my left hand, right? It's the same thing with thoughts. You can have two different thoughts, and you can make a choice to look at different ones. Why? Because we also have a built-in capacity for mindfulness. And mindfulness basically means that we have the ability to kind of step outside of our thoughts and look at ourselves almost as an observer. Look at what you're thinking about and say, oh, I'm thinking that thought. Isn't that interesting? Instead of getting wrapped up in the thought, oh my God, I totally suck. Oh my God, I can't do this thing, and we're not gonna make the thing. You can take a step out and you can say, oh wow, look, I'm getting really upset about this. Maybe what other thought can I choose? Right? So you can do that. The other thing that you can do is use self-compassion. Now, I know that self-compassion probably sounds like a really wimpy, super new agey, like very soft thing. But self-compassion is actually very powerful. So self-compassion has been related to helping people overcome insecurities, helping people overcome self-doubt, really helping people with sticking with things and developing grit. Self-compassion is actually a really powerful tool. So here's what I would love for you to do to think about self-compassion. So we already have the ability to be compassionate, and if you don't have the ability to be compassionate, that means you're a sociopath. So hopefully there are no psychopaths or sociopaths in here. And if you are, just keep it inside. Just that's your own personal business. We don't need to know about it. Please don't kill any of us in our sleep. At least not tonight. I really want to go to the speaker's dinner afterwards, so maybe later. So the self-compassion template, think about if you had a friend who was going through a really rough period of time, who was really upset and came to you and said, look, I'm really upset about this. Even if it was about something with work, I was just really having these moments where I just really feel like I just suck and everybody on the team is just so much better than I am, and I feel like I'm holding the project back or whatever. How would you deal with your friend? You wouldn't be like, yeah, dude, you're like really messing up. You would probably, again, I hope not. You would probably be like, you're doing great. You're doing okay. And then you've done this thing you gave this contribution that was valuable. You did this, and you helped that person out, and your coding is all you built that. It was amazing, right? You would probably prop that person up. So think about how you would deal with a friend and how you would show compassion to a friend, and take that and turn that inside to yourself. That's your self-compassion template. Second thing that we're going to do is we're going to recognize the inner critical voice. So now you've got your papers. This is what I want you to do with your papers. You ready? He was like, I was taking notes. Here you go, sweet pea. I want you to think about your primary fear around being creative. Now, let me just take a moment to say this. How many of you, first of all, are like, I'm totally not creative? Show of hands. Okay, good. Not that many people. Great. Because what I'm going to say is if you're writing code, you're probably one of the most creative people on the planet. Because if you think about this, let's just take a moment and think about this. Somebody says to you, hey, look, I want to build an application, and I want it to do this thing, this thing, this thing, and this thing. And you say, okay, great, I'll build it for you. Like, think what you had to do. You had to figure out what it is that they wanted, how it was going to be achieved, what language you were going to do it in, how it was going to be the most efficient, how it connected with all this other stuff. There's a guy who wrote a book called Creativity Intelligence, and he says, his name's Bruce Nussbaum, and he says that creativity is all about seeing patterns and making connections. That's it. If you can see patterns and make connections, which, frankly, as a developer, that's what you're gifted at, then you're creative. Full stop. Full stop is British. So, now, let's go back to this. Think about your primary fear around being creative. And what I want you to do, if you can't think of something, you're like, I can't think of anything, then use these prompts. Any of these prompts, just fill in the blanks. If I, share my ideas, then people will laugh at me. I'm not imaginative enough. I can't, whatever it is. Whatever those things are, so I want you to take a moment. Don't take a long time. Write down one fear about creativity on your piece of paper. Do you want another thingy? So you're good. Just write it on your piece of paper. Please write it in English. Please, everybody write it, because everybody's going to do this thing. Don't sign your name on it. Don't put your Twitter handle on it. Don't put your domain or your email address. Just write down this one thing, and as soon as you're done writing it down, I want you to take the paper and I want you to crumble it up in a ball. That's right. He was like, first one. Who else has got it? By the way, okay, I have to share this because it makes me laugh every time. I gave a talk about the inner critic, and we did this exercise at a design lecture series at Facebook. And in a moment of sheer lack of good self-judgment, I said to the audience, I was like, has everybody got their ball? And they were like, yeah. I was like, show me your balls. So, in the spirit of that, if you've got the crumbled up paper ball in your hand, hold it up in the air. I want to see everybody with the ball in the air. Write it down. We'll wait for you, everybody, because if not everybody does this, then it's not going to be even. This needs to be even. We're waiting for you, the people who haven't got your balls in the air. He's like, I got mine. Who are we waiting for still? Gentlemen? Everybody? Okay. Stand up, please. Turn to the other side of the room. And on three, not before, I want you to throw the ball. On three. Wait, there's like a lot of people who are sitting down. What's up? Okay, fine. This side of the room doesn't get as many goodies. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Yeah! All right, pick up a ball. Who doesn't have a ball? Share the wealth. Share the wealth. If they've got extra balls around. Oh, it's yours. And you see why they need to be even? Who needs one? Whoa. You have 2? Who else needs one? Oh.
This one doesn't have any critic.
Well, then there you go. One more. He doesn't have any balls. One more. Donna. Here, me. I'll be the distributor of balls. Who else? Boop. Boop. All right, sorry. If there's anybody else? So, who wants to share? See, totally anonymous. You don't know where this thing came from, and you don't know where yours is. Awesome. Everybody's safe. What we got? Yeah.
I can't come up with original ideas because I am not creative enough.
Boom. I can't come up with original ideas because I'm not creative enough. Who else? Yeah. Right? Okay. If I'm at, so that's a great one for leadership. What else? Yeah. Right. Okay. Great. This is all great. What else? Oh, yeah. Sounds like me all the time. I'm always wanting to nap. We just have a nap colony of people who aren't creative because they just want to take a nap. Anybody else? Who else want to share? Yeah. I'm not secure enough. Anybody else? More. Yeah. Procrastination. Awesome. I hope you can see from this, because then everybody who's got something written on their sheet means that was another person who had that, and you probably saw things or heard things that sounded familiar, right? That may have even been exactly what you wrote. Not what you wrote, but exactly what you wrote, right? So the nice thing about this is that you're not alone, and that everybody has this, except for the people who didn't do it. I saw y'all. I'm gonna come find you afterwards. They're like, I hate this I hate this talk. So you're not alone. This is a very common thing, and that we've got ways to deal with it, right? So I wanna help you get to the point, like I said, where you have less of those thoughts and more of the I can do it. And actually, the awesome thing about when you're in flow state, do you even think I can do it? Or are you just doing it? You're just doing it. There's no thought. You actually lose yourself when you're in a flow state. It's like the most amazing thing. It's like you become the most of who you can be while completely forgetting about who you are at the same time. Amazing. All right, so first set of business here is overcoming self-doubt. Now, when I was 12 years old, I went to a camp with my best friend, Emily, and we went, and there was like an art and crafts thing. So this was almost before computers. Not entirely, but it was before like computers were like a thing, and they were like in everybody's house. Oh no, I'm totally dating myself. And the nice thing about me is that I've got like the best genes in the world, and I totally don't look my age. Amazing. I'm gonna look like this for the next 20 years. It's gonna be awesome. So we had an arts and crafts segment, and I drew a mermaid, which for a 12-year-old isn't half bad. So my friend Emily, by the way, in the other picture, was really, really into comic books, and she like heavily influenced me to like start drawing like superhero women and superhero men and stuff like that. So I was like, I draw a superhero mermaid. I was really proud of my handiwork, and I was showing the picture to Emily, and I was like, girl, look at what I drew. This is the bomb. And this little heifer, this chick from my group, comes up behind me, completely unsolicited. She was like small and blonde and like super cute. And she comes up behind me and she says, hit it. Because this makes a move. She comes up, and she literally comes up behind me, looks over my shoulder, and she goes, it looks like a frog. And I was like, inside like, what? That was kind of how I wanted to be inside. Like, oh really, bish? What? But really, the that I felt was that. I was just like, but I really thought this was good. In my head, I interpreted, first of all, not my friend, don't like her, don't care. completely unsolicited, didn't ask her. She just rolls up, gives her opinion. And my thought was, maybe I'm not a very good drawer. Maybe I'm not as good an artist as I thought I was. Ugh. I was suffering from what I like to call creativity denial, which is all the people who said, I'm not creative enough, or I'm not creative, or whatever. That's this. By the way, this is a snowball. I call these snowballs. This is somebody actually wrote this. Like these things that you're going to see in the presentation, they're from ones that I've saved from other people exactly like you, right? Something I call creativity denial. So I was thinking, okay, I'm at a developer conference. I'm probably going to have like a lot of resistance to this whole creativity thing. So I want to talk about this. Like I said, you're some of the most creative folks on the planet, and for you, for the most part, potentially code is poetry, right? And if you're concerned about you don't have enough ideas, you're not imaginative enough, you don't come up with things and stuff like that, I want to do a little exercise. So I want everybody to close their eyes. I can see you, by the way. If you don't have your eyes closed, I can actually see you. So close your eyes. She's like, I'm going to close my eyes. Now, I want you to imagine somebody has given you a gift. Somebody gave you, you got a present, an amazing present, and I want you to think about all of the details of it, what kind of wrapping paper it has, what kind of package it's in, what's the shape of the package. Is it square? Is it round? Is it like amorphous? Like just use your imagination. What does it look like? And then you're examining this package and like you shake it and you smell it and you're like, what is in this package? I have no idea. I got this amazing gift. And then I want you to imagine going in and opening up the box, taking off the wrapping or whatever, opening it up. What's inside the box? What's that gift? Probably something you've always wanted. That person's so thoughtful. And then I want you to look at that gift and look at it in really great detail. And then you're like, hey, wait a minute. Is there anything else in this box? And so you look in the box and lo and behold, there is another thing in the box. What's that second thing? And then, so everybody's like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. That's exactly what I had. And then you look in for a third thing because you're just like 3 times the charm. What's the third thing in the box? All right. Okay, open your eyes. Did anybody like, I got nothing? Every single one of you tapped into your own imagination. And if it was a charger, or if it was a new laptop, or if it was a puppy, a lot of people have puppies, and I say, okay, describe the dog. And somebody will say, oh, it was a, Weimaraner puppy. And then the other person will be like, oh, it was like a Parisian water dog, a French water dog. And I'm like, yeah, 2 totally different dogs. Your imaginations, you all came up with completely different things, all informed by your life and what you like and all of this stuff. Your imagination is limitless. As by the way, this is a good tool that you can use if you're having problems thinking of stuff, to just take a few minutes and just be like, what's in the box? What's in my present box? And just go in there and just start pulling things out and seeing what you pull out, just to get your brain into that mode. Hit it again. One more time. Thank you. So that's one tool that you can use. Another tool, so if you're having trouble thinking, did anybody watch Winnie the Pooh? I know it's like so old, but he used to do this think thing, which I loved. Yes, Winnie the Pooh, think. So if you're having trouble coming up with ideas, I want you to try this. Carry around a notebook and just start writing down 10 ideas a day. Force yourself, challenge yourself to write down 10 ideas a day. And they don't have to be good ideas. And the other thing that you can do is you can have it be bug lists. Bug lists of things that actually bug you, like things that you find annoying all the time. Why does my electric toothbrush have the button here and not here? How come in the bathroom in the hotel today, I had like one of these, I see things like this all the time, where they had like 2 outlets, and here's the sink here with the whole, countertop, and then they have these 2 outlets on the side, and the outlet that you can plug something in is here, and then the outlet that permanently has the hairdryer is here. And I was like, hi, the person's here, like the outlet that they're gonna use all the time should be on this side, why? Bugged me, it goes on my bug list. Make sure outlets are available on the proper side every single time. It can be things that bug you, it could be done in a theme, like what would Elon Musk do, or what would Madame Curie do, or it could be along the lines of, like appliances that annoy me and things that I'd like to see. It could be anything. They don't have to be good ideas, they just have to be ideas. It's just something to kick your brain into gear, into creating ideas. The other thing that I was suffering when Heather came up and gave her little input on me was that I was afraid of being judged. And what happens is we end up getting into a thing, it's called ruminating. So ruminating is basically, have you ever had a moment where you did something and you felt like it was stupid, and then you thought about it over and over and over and over and over again? You're, I can't believe I did that, and then I said that, and then I did, and then I said that, and why did I say? Oh, that was such a bad thing to say. And you do that, and then you go back like a week later, and you're like, I can't believe I said that. Oh my God. Right? That's ruminating, done after ruminant animals who basically chew something, digest it, bring it back up and chew it again, right? Same thing. So what you can do is, if you can take a squeeze toy and you can put it in your non-dominant hand, if you find yourself ruminating and spinning on the same thing over and over again, you can take a squeeze toy, put it in your non-dominant hand, and just squeeze it for a few minutes. It will actually help distract your brain, make yourself do something with the non-dominant hand and distract your brain out of the rumination cycle. Si, senor. Because your dominant hand is too used to doing stuff, right? So your brain is too used to doing things with your dominant hand. It basically starts to turn off, whereas when you force yourself to do something with a non-dominant hand, you actually make your brain do something different. Yes? I think you could probably do it with anything. Squeeze ball is one of the things that I found in my research, but I bet you could do any kind of thing, try to develop any kind of skill with your hand, and make it something that's repetitive, but maybe something that even might be kind of difficult. Like trying to write with your non-dominant hand would probably work a lot too. Deep, right? Okay. The other thing too is that with negativity bias, something that comes along with another bias that we have is confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is basically, if you have a very well-established idea, concept about how something is, what you do is you will seek out confirmation of that and make it true. So if you think, I suck and everything I do is no good, then everything that you're going to look for is confirmation for that. Right? So there's a way that you can hack confirmation bias, and that is by basically surrounding yourself with things that show that confirmation bias, the negative confirmation bias, is wrong. So confirmation bias is kind of cool because it's neutral. It works to the negative and it also works to the positive. If you think you're going to find positive stuff around, then by golly, you find it. I tend to think that people are going to be nice all the time, and what ends up happening is that people are really nice to me almost all the time. It's great. It works out great. I'm so for it. So one thing that you can do is you can keep something called, in marketing, they call it a swipe file. You guys know this with like your coding snippet libraries and stuff like that. You take pieces of code that you like, you're like, I'm going to use this later. Boom, you have it. You can go to it later on. You can do that with positive things that people say to you. So somebody tweets and says, oh my God, that article that you wrote, that was amazing, thank you so much, or comments on something, or if somebody writes you an email, or somebody says, your manager or something gives you like positive feedback and like writes it in an email. You're like, oh, saving it. And you take that stuff, you save it all in one place, and then when you're having these moments where you're like, oh, wait a minute, stop. You go to your little kudos file, and you just start looking at how people are like, nope, nope, you're okay. And that'll start to shift that negative confirmation bias into positive. So, next step of the process, transform self-talk. So, now I move on. I am not 12 at Girl Scout camp anymore. Now I am the very wizened age of 14, and now I am playing basketball at middle school. Now, so I stopped playing basketball for a couple of years because the girls on my team were shady, and they like totally turned on me and like kicked me out of the group, and I was like, I don't want to hang out with you guys anymore. But it turned out that you can't see me up close, but I'm like 185 centimeters standing right now. I'm very tall. And when I was that age, as you can see, I'm the one in the back, I was about 182 centimeters. So they were like super keen to have me back on the basketball team. They were like, come on back, tall girl in the house. So I was like, finally I gave up, I relented. I said, okay. So the thing is that they all had about 2 more years worth of practicing together and playing together than I had. So my skill was really low. So when it came to playing in the games, I was absolutely terrified to get on the court. Can you imagine going to a basketball game, say you're going to your kid's basketball game and everything, and you see this like enormous, tall black girl on the bench. You're like, oh my God, she's gonna be insane. Don't let her on the floor, she's gonna destroy my child, right? That was not me. I was okay in practice, but see this one right here? This one is my friend Anita. She was amazing. And I was like, I can't compete with that. Like, I'm not as good as she is. I'll just let them do the thing, and I'll just have like a cup of tea. Hit it a couple times. I'll just, look, I'm like, my legs are crossed. Like, I look like I'm just like there to like, I'm just there to watch. I'm another spectator. I'm not trying to play in the game or anything. And what was happening, I was so terrified because I believed that everybody thought they all expected me to be amazing, and I knew I wasn't that player. I knew I wasn't amazing like that. What I was suffering from was comparison syndrome. I was comparing myself to everybody else. I wasn't being like who I could be, and it was totally messing me up, and you guys would probably have the same kind of thing. Really good insight is that you can't compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. You look at other people's success, and you look at what they've done, and you're like, oh my God, it was amazing for them, and they've had all of these, breaks and all this stuff, or they're just talented, and you don't know that inside they're feeling some of the exact same stuff that you are. So my quick tool for this one is just to say no. Whenever you find yourself getting into a place where you're comparing yourself to the other person, remember that you're seeing their highlight reels. You are not seeing all the bloopers, all the things in the background. You're not seeing all the problems and things that they struggled with. You are seeing like the thing that, like the whole Instagram social media thing. Everybody promotes what looks good, but I read an article last night on how to take a really good selfie, because my selfie game is like weak, okay? It's weak, it's awful. Every time I take a picture, I'm like, I look like, I don't know. So I read an article about it, and one of the things they said is like, you have to take a lot of selfies to find the one selfie that looks good. And I was like, really? That just sounds like a lot. And then like one place was like, oh, you should take like a video and then go through the stills, and I was like, who's got time for that? Like, seriously, that's crazy. But that just goes to show you, when you see like good pictures and all that stuff, it's like, because people have gone through like tons and tons of those pictures to find the really good one. Same thing with our lives. So the other thing too was, look, I'm a tall black chick. Like there's no getting around that. I couldn't hide, like I come to Europe all the time. I stick out like a sore thumb. It's kind of awesome in some ways, and sometimes it's kind of annoying. There's no way that I could sit on a basketball court and be inconspicuous. And there's probably ways that you are trying to be inconspicuous and you're trying to hide, and it's unnecessary. So what I say to that is to instead of trying to hide your uniqueness, embrace it. Figure out how it is you're unique, how it is that you being you is like the best thing possible. What is the thing that you can do that nobody else can do, or that combination of skills and things that you have that nobody else has? And then take that and make that the thing that is the biggest thing in the forefront for you. Because nobody else has that. You're the only one on the planet who has that. The sound, I'm just like, oh, the sound. Okay. And then the other thing that I was suffering from was high self-criticism. So I kept saying to myself, I'm not good enough, and I'm this and that. And frankly, if I had just gotten out on the floor and played in the game and played horribly for a while, I would have gotten better so much faster than sitting there and just being like, no, just I'm not good. So one of the things that is about that, again, you can see that your inner critic is all about how you're talking to yourself, right? And what is really important to know is that just because you're thinking something, it doesn't make it true. Just have a moment for that. Don't believe what you think. Just because you're thinking it doesn't make it true. So one thing that you can do is you can actually use a scientific approach. And you can start to question your thoughts and think about them and think like a scientist. And so if you're thinking like one of these things, I shouldn't make, no, I can't read this one. I'm like, I'm not strong enough. That's good, it's nice and simple. So you can take it and you can turn around, like you could be like a science and like do like try to do an experiment. Like, am I not strong enough? And just turn it into a question. Instead of making it like a statement, turn it into a question. Am I not strong enough, or am I strong enough? Let's see how I'm strong. And then you can start to list these ways that you're strong. So you can actually take your thing, your belief, and you can take it and flip it on its head by turning it into a question, and then seeing what the answer to that question will be. The other thing too is to have like a self-talk reboot. So one of the things that you can do is you can talk to yourself a lot like a coach. So there's actually a guy in the United States, I think he's at the University of Chicago or somewhere in Chicago, his name's Ethan Koss, and he's done a lot of studies with self-talk and everything, and he's found that if you do something that's called self-distancing, you can actually change what your thinking is. And self-distancing is basically talking to yourself as if you're a third person. So instead of saying, like for example, this morning, if I was trying to get myself psyched up for this talk, which I didn't need to do because you guys are awesome and I knew it was going to be great. But if I had been in that place, instead of going, okay, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to talk about the inner critic and I'm going to try to give them all the information and try to give them all the tools and I hope it works out, I would say instead, Denise, you're going to go in there, you're going to talk about the inner critic, you're going to give them the tools, and it's going to be great. So you talk to yourself as if you're talking to somebody else, right? It's actually a coaching technique that a lot of professional athletes use. They actually, again, in the study, that he had college students who were taking tests, and the group that talked to themselves, that self-distanced and talked to themselves in the third person, performed better on the test than the group that talked to themselves in first person and said I. Boom, that's real. All right, last little bit here. Own your expertise, you guys. So then we move to the time when now I'm not 14 or 12. Now I am at the much more mature age of 24, and I've graduated from the University of Washington. And I'm having a conversation with my father. My father says to me, well, Denise, now that you've graduated from college, what do you want to do? And I had really admired a lot of writers, including Maya Angelou, who I met when I was 16. she was the keynote speaker at my cousin's graduation from Howard, and I came and sat down at the table, and she said, "Go to college." And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go." She was like, "Go to college." And I was like, "What?" She was like, "Go to college." I go, "Okay, I'm gonna go to college. God, it's part of the plan anyways." She's very nice. Rest in peace. May she rest in peace. So I said to him, "I think I'd like to be a writer." I had had professors at school commend my writing. I had one professor want to do independent study with me so he could help me with my writing. I had another professor have me come and be a writing tutor at the writing center. I was like, I got some chops. I got chops. And my father said to me, looking over his glasses at me, he said, "Do you know how hard it is to get published?" Now, I have to tell you guys something about my father. My father was no joke. It'd be one thing if he were blue collar and he had never gone to school and never really made much of himself and was intimidated by academia and people who were studied and everything. But no, that was not my father. My father was the first person in his family to graduate from high school and also the first person in his family to graduate from college. He, at the age of 20, got his pilot's license in Detroit, Michigan in 1957, before the Civil Rights era. And he got a degree in mechanical engineering, aeronautical engineering, actually, specifically, and was an aeronautical engineer until he decided he didn't want to work for people who weren't as smart as he was. And he went back to school and he got a doctor of optometry. And he built experimental aircraft and flew it in his spare time as a hobby, as one does. So this was the second of 3 aircraft that he built in his entire life. And I grew up with an airplane fuselage in the garage instead of a car. That was my father. And despite all of the barriers that he broke and things that he achieved in his life, he still believed these prevalent myths that run through society, which is that creativity is something you do in your spare time and not a job, that artists starve, and that it's very hard to get published, if at all. And so I took what he said, took it in, and thought, getting published is hard, so I should just forget about being a writer. Just let it go. Chuck it. I was suffering from a number of things. One of them is deficiency anxiety. I'm never going to be good enough. I'm not going to be unique enough, original enough, so why even try? Here's a thing that I want you guys to consider, that you don't have to think those thoughts, and you can actually reprogram your brain. Now, here's a really cool thing. There's studies by another woman in Chicago. I don't know why Chicago, but she does studies with gesture and thought, and she studies kids, and she has people teach kids arithmetic, maths, but she has them teach them with gestures. So when they do an equation on the thing, she has them talk about it and say, yeah, you're going to do this, and then you're going to take this away from this side, and you're going to add it to that side. And when they mix the gestures up, the kids actually mix up the information. If she says, you're going to take it away from this side and you're going to add it to that side, the other way around, they will do that instead of what she said. It's amazing. So you can actually program yourself using gestures. And so, what gesture do we use all the time on the computer to get rid of stuff? What's it? You guys use it every day. Swipe left. Boom. So when you find yourself having thoughts that you're like, I don't need that thought, you can literally think the thought and say, and you can say swipe left, you can do swipe left, you can say delete, you can say cancel, edit, whatever. I like delete a lot. So a lot of times if you're thinking thoughts that don't work for you, delete. Drop it. Delete. But do it with the gesture, because that'll actually start to train your brain and get the connection together. The other thing that you can think about is, and you probably guys might do this already, you guys are in an industry where you're taking in a lot of information all the time. Stuff is changing all the time. Specifications are changing. New languages are coming out. I mean, Go 2.0 is going to be dramatically different from the last version, right? Amazing. And so when you're taking in new information, here's something that you can do. When you've gotten all the information together and everything, what you can try to do to actually get it to solidify, instead of trying to impress other people first, tell it to a teddy bear. I have a friend, I know a guy who said, we call it penguin programming, where we actually have a penguin, a stuffed penguin, and whenever we need to do it, it's like, tell it to the penguin. So tell it to whatever stuffed thing of some sort, or you can tell it to a 4-year-old. Of course, the 4-year-old will be like, oh, no, Mom. Dad, it's not like that. It's like, with all of your guys' kids, I'm sure they'll be like, no. What you need to do is this. No, you missed that part, right? She does all the typing because you can't type, right? So tell it to a penguin, a teddy bear, a 2 or 3-year-old, and sit there and do that and have that help you get it in your brain really well. Takes the pressure off. And then the last thing I want to talk about this is it's not enough just to own your expertise. I want you to share your expertise, share your brilliance. Don't let all of those great ideas that you have in your head just sit inside of there. Share them with other people. So what you need to do, what I challenge you to do if you're not doing it, how many of you guys blog? Okay, so more of you should probably be writing articles or submitting stuff, submitting code snippets, or even mentoring people. How many have mentored folks? Yeah? More mentorship. Pass on the information that you know so that you can help other people. If people come into the company, be one of the people that helps onboard them, right? Because you've got like this wealth of information, you're all awesome in different ways. You can do that, and then by doing that, you actually end up knowing more, knowing what you know, and feeling better about yourself. Final thing here. So, by standing up to my inner critic, I was able to do stuff that I probably wouldn't have been able to do, and I probably wouldn't be standing here before you had I not done this. So I actually, despite Heather's little quip over my shoulder, I decided to just keep doing stuff because I loved doing design artwork. I ended up doing a map of the world for a teacher at the end of high school that I was very proud of. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was amazing at the time. And I ended up becoming what I consider, a fairly decent designer and person who can do creative things. I also ended up stepping into my power. Actually, my friend Anita left a couple of years later, and there was no tall girl on the basketball team, and I was like, all right, I will step into this place. And I ended up becoming a really good basketball player. I would have been a better basketball player if I'd been playing, but it's okay. So I became a strong player, and being a strong basketball player and being willing to have people look at me now gets it so that I can get up on a stage and I feel totally comfortable with having people look at me. It's great. And despite what my father said, by the way, FYI, my father was a badass, as you can tell. But out of all the things that he's done in his life, I don't ever remember him writing a book and trying to publish it. So how does he know that it's hard to be published? Unless he's tried it, right? Consider the source of the opinions when they come to you, because they may not be founded, despite the level of authority. Despite what my father said, I became an author serendipitously. Those book deals literally fell in my lap. I did not have to work for them. I talked to the woman, Wendy, at the party. She was like, I was like, I could write that book. She was like, let's talk. She sent me an email a week later. We got on the phone. We talked. I submitted a proposal. She pitched the proposal. Boom. She got me a contract. The end. Is it hard to get published? Nope. Second book. I think I'm going to self-publish. My housemate was like, oh yeah, I know a guy who's a publisher in town. Let me see if he's interested. We talked. Yeah, we'll publish your book. Boom. Contract. Second book. Is it getting hard? Is it hard to get published? In my experience, it's not. I'm just saying. Sorry, Dad. So, became an author twice. All that led me to doing what I love now, which was, I was talking to Jen, and I was like, how would I become a speaker? Write a book, you do your thing, you tell people your stories, and all that stuff. Boom, you're a speaker. Done, done and done. All brought me to doing what I love. So, this is actually about you, though. This is about what you can do in the world. Hopefully, you now have some tools, and there's just a small sampling of what you could possibly do to get to the point where you feel empowered, you feel like you can collaborate, you feel expansive, you feel successful, you feel liberated, right? You can get to all that place. You can get to that place where you have that flow. You can be a stronger contributor. You can be a better collaborator. You can work with other people together because you're not killing your ideas, you're actually sharing them, and then you're encouraging the ideas of other people. And then you can actually even lead. Like you can be a stronger leader and actually lead people by example, by mentoring, by sharing your expertise, etc. So not only that, but you can leave a legacy. You can have something better. You can build a game, right, that other people can play. You could do all kinds of things. You can leave something for others. It's not just about you. It's about everybody else too. Now, I say all this stuff, but it is definitely a thing of continuous improvement. It's not like you do a couple of things, you swipe left a few times, and you're like, sweet, I have no more inner critic. It's kind of constant work, right? So the irony is that when I finished writing my book about the inner critic, when it came to actually reaching out to people and asking for them to like do reviews and share it with their thing and all that stuff, I was like, oh, I don't want to bother people. They're busy, and I don't know. So I'm still working on my inner critic too. There's parts of it that are less quiet, and there's parts of it that are still there, and I'm still working on it. And so if you want the slides, by the way, just as a little aside, if you want the slides, because the slides are pretty, you can go to Denice Slides, deniceslides.com, and there's just like a little email form. You go there, fill out the email, boom, you'll get an email with the link to the slides, and you're good to go. And there's more information, like I said, in my book, Banish Your Inner Critic. It's like literally tons. It's almost all exercises. Stories and exercises, that's what it is, and information and basically in scientific background for all of that stuff. So, and I would have had books here, but like it's far and they're heavy and stuff. I have one book, which I left in the hotel room, but I will give it to a person who asks me a question at the end. And not now. And then, so let me finish this up. So you probably thought, okay, I've got this voice, I'm going to have it forever. It's not possible to get rid of it because it's just baked in. But the thing is, again, now you have tools, now you have some stuff to work with. And then you can get to a place where you can get past your blocks and you can make magic, right? You can actually start to do something really substantial and really amazing. And you can also have impact, like I said, not just about you, it goes beyond you. So I kind of believe that everybody's got like these seeds of greatness inside, and sometimes they're like just seeds, and then sometimes they start to sprout. But what happens is when we have the inner critic, it's like we're like holding it back and snipping it away and everything, instead of letting it be fully growing and fully being magnificent. And so I feel like you guys are ready to feel your power. And like Roy said last night, the power is in your hands. And so what I want everybody to do to stand up, and I want you to think back into the annals of your memories of, you probably have like a Heather, and you probably have like yourself holding you back, and you probably have somebody like your father, my father, sorry. And so I want you, for each one of these, I want you to do a swipe left, do a delete. So think about your version of somebody in your childhood who said something crappy to you that's stuck with you until now. Ready? On 3, we're gonna delete it. Ready? 1, 2. Don't forget, you're gonna swipe it. 1, 2, 3. Delete. Sometime where you held yourself back, you could have been badass and awesome, and you kind of kept yourself back. You still did okay, but you know that you could have even done better. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Delete. And then finally, that person in your life, that authority figure who said something and gave you a piece of information, which was crap information. You don't need it anymore. You can get rid of it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Delete. That's it, you guys. I'm done. Thank you. So, one book, one question. Who wants the book or who has a question? She's like me. Me. Question. So depression's hard, so there's that. One of the things about depression is that a lot of it is chemical. So you have to deal with that. I know because I have a family member who's chronically depressed. But I would say that thoughts, the mindfulness and being aware of your thoughts and challenging the thoughts is probably going to be one of the best ways to deal with it. And Dennis is actually going to be talking about a lot of that stuff later on in his talk. And so he also has some great, yeah. So thank you, you guys. You were great.